Now we're excited to be joined by three top leaders who are really going to talk through some of this even more. We're being joined by Burgess Davis of PepsiCo, Ignacio Gavilan of the Consumer Goods Forum, and Bridget Croke of Closed Loop Partners. So thank you all so much for being with us today. Happy to be here, Bridget.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So let's just start right at the beginning here. Designing packaging in a way that it's less likely to become waste and more likely to be reused or to be recycled. And Ignacio, I'd love to start with you here. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Consumer Goods Forum works with some of your corporate members on sustainable packaging design?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Mary, for the opportunity. So basically, for those of you who are not familiar with the Consumer Goods Forum, is an association that brings together retailers and manufacturers from across the world. Is CEO-led, and it focuses on positive change through collective action. So obviously, plastics is a critical topic for us. So our recipe to solve the plastic problem is less and better plastic and a better system for collection sorting. Sorry for the noise, but let me address the part on less and better plastic. So plastic for us, obviously, think about retailers and manufacturers, is versatile, inexpensive, durable, super efficient way to package our goods. But of course, it does not belong in the environment. So at global level, we currently have good level of commitment and detailed design guidelines for packaging. You have targets in the New Plastics Economy global commitment, for example, by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, 100% reusable, recyclable, compostable. You have technical eco-design guidelines, like the Association of Plastic Recyclers in the US. But Mary, despite the fact that plastic packaging is fully within our control as companies, we still see excess packaging used only for marketing purposes, packaging design choices with no chance of being recycled back to packaging, a critical shortage, of course, of recycled plastics for packaging, or the use of problematic plastics that completely disrupt the recycling process. So leading companies of the Consumer Goods Forum jointly and voluntarily committed to specific design changes to reduce plastic waste and increase recycling aligned with these technical guidelines. So the Consumer Goods Forum, through a coalition of action with 41 members, PepsiCo being one of them, has aligned on a short list of clear design changes to implement the less and better plastic recipe. So the coalition has identified a full suite of 9 golden design rules, voluntary, visible, ambitious changes that, of course, require convergent action to achieve progress. So we need, again, the collective action, the commitment from all of them for this to really take off. So companies are asked to voluntarily commit to implement this sort of short list of specific time-bound design changes. Latest will be 2025 to reduce this excess packaging and ensure that necessary packaging is recycled. So 2 of them have been published. The rest will be published next month. So stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. We'll have to keep an eye out for those. Check out the Consumer Goods Forum website to see we can catch a glimpse of what those other 7 core design principles are. Definitely sounds like some interesting guidelines for companies to really begin to rethink how they're looking at their packaging. And Bridget, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're seeing out there, through the course of Closed Loop Partners investments in your work when it comes specifically to package design.
Sure. I think, the biggest thing that we're seeing, and just for folks who are less familiar, Closed Loop Partners is an investment and innovation firm working to accelerate a more circular economy. So we're investing in upstream innovation, supply chain logistics, and then downstream recovery. So, what we're recommending to our brand partners, many of whom are investors or kind of work with us on the innovation side, is that there is kind of a suite of solutions that are going to help solve this, that there's kind of no silver bullet out there. But when they're thinking about their design, they need to be thinking about whether it's a reuse model or a single-use item, whether it's plastic or another material, there's always trade-offs. There's always some impact. So what is the, how can you design things in such a way that it is the lower barrier to do the right thing with that? how much of that material is out there? Are there a lot of other companies using similar designs, similar resin types, or other materials such that it can go through a consistent stream for recovery with a lot of other stuff? So Ignacio's point about working pre-competitively and aligning on that design, nobody can do that on their own. It just won't work in a system where everything then gets aggregated. And then making sure that they're thinking that wherever that recovery is, whether it's a recycling system, a composting system, those are businesses. And so we need to think about how can we design in such a way that one can extract a lot of value out of that and make it as simple as possible to get that back into as the feedstock for packaging supply chains. And so there's a lot of super interesting upstream innovation in terms of material science, kind of reuse models, and then just brands coming together to align on some creating standards around those designs, and hopefully working with the recovery systems to make sure that there is that value, that there's a lot of the material, but also just recycling systems. It's not the most, there's not a lot of big R&D budgets in these recycling companies. So that really has to come in partnership with the brands, and making sure that just the recycling system understands that there are some new packaging types coming in, and working to help innovate on what can come through that recycling system, because they're not just going to decide that on their own.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying about how there's really no silver bullet and no single solution to this challenge, and that really brands need to kind of figure out what that means for them. And Burgess, I'm interested about what PepsiCo is doing here and how you're really looking to rethink some of your packaging with sustainability in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. At PepsiCo, we recognize the role we play in the circular economy and helping to ensure that society, enhances the way that we think about making, using, and disposing of our packaging. So we absolutely think about it end to end. And just to give you a couple of examples, in 2019, so a couple years ago, we instituted a program globally called Sustainable from the Start. And what it does is it aims to bring together all of the key cross-functional team members that are thinking about innovation and product development. So from marketing and sustainability, procurement, R&D, operations and finance, we bring everyone together to look at the environmental footprint of a new product at the get-go from the start of the process. And what it does is it provides a framework, guidelines, and even metrics around things like recyclability, greenhouse gas emissions, and water use. So when we're taking a look at a new product, we're making sure that it is truly sustainable from the start. Another example is a consortium that we joined last year called Pulpex. It's a consortium that we have formed with other consumer goods companies like Diageo and Unilever. And in this one, we're working to develop and scale the first recyclable paper bottle. And it's a breakthrough technology that really will enable the use of sustainably sourced pulp in a fully recyclable bottle or package. And it's under development now, but we're really excited that it should be able to come to market in the coming months. And it's something that will ensure quality, food safety, and that could be used by others in the industry as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have to keep an eye out for those paper bottles on store shelves later this year. And really interesting to learn more about what PepsiCo is doing as a brand. Ignacio, I'd love to come back to you really quickly. Again, through some of your work with those corporate members, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned around circularity, sustainability when it comes to packaging through some of your work with those brands?
So I would say experience with global brands shows that I think the residual material value in the disposed products can be substantial, but the cost of reclaiming it has historically been super high and operationally difficult due to lack of technology for tracking, sorting, etc. So that has been a reflection we've seen over the past few years. The role of brands, of course, is innovating and designing for circular economy right now. Research and innovation lies at the heart of the branded goods industry. So this is their territory. So when it comes to circularity, I think there's a value chain focus on consumer goods companies, focusing on two things. One is the efficient end of use of the product, the recovery and sorting. And the second is the product development. So what I mentioned before, and it was mentioned by the two other speakers as well, is designing for reusability and recyclability. That's the fundamental piece where we, the industry, can add to this circular economy debate.
Absolutely. And I really think that what you all are saying about really thinking through that at the outset, really as you're conceiving of products, designing with the intention of reuse, recyclability, really just beginning that way, and how that can really drive those solutions forward. And to segue from recycling over to reuse a bit, that's really kind of the next step in this conversation. Burgess, I'd love to talk a little bit about what PepsiCo is doing here in terms of embracing reuse models, embracing reuse.
Absolutely. For our beverage portfolio in particular, we've been looking at ways to reinvent the solutions that we bring to consumers, and we've created a whole portfolio that we call Beyond the Bottle. And what it enables is consumers to be able to really enjoy our products either at home or on the go in new ways. And at the heart of that Beyond the Bottle strategy is really SodaStream. And SodaStream is the number one sparkling water beverage. And it allows consumers to personalize and customize their favorite beverages, usually at home, but we also have on-the-go solutions as well. And over the lifetime of SodaStream and the use, an individual can avoid, thousands of single-use plastic bottles. And with the growth of SodaStream over the next few years, we expect the avoidance of 87 billion single-use plastic bottles. So it really is a wonderful, reusable, sustainable solution. And what's great about it, it becomes a whole platform. And at PepsiCo, we've been able to build upon it and even provide a lot of our brands and offerings. Like in the US, we launched Bubbly a number of months ago, where you can now do Bubbly drops at home on the SodaStream.
Wow, 87 billion, that's a massive figure, and really interesting to learn a little bit more about how you're thinking and how you're seeing customers potentially being able to enjoy your products, like you said, without reaching for a single-use item. And Bridget, we know that working with brands on reuse systems, circularity is really in the wheelhouse of Closed Loop Partners. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how you all work with brands thinking towards reuse.
Yeah, well, first of all, I love SodaStream, and it's a really great example of something that was acquired and then owned in-house by PepsiCo, so it could scale quickly. And I think that's a great model for brands. And I think a lot of brands are looking and saying, our goals are really aggressive. We got to get to these fast. And so what can we own and just, kind of soup to nuts do, which I think is an important model. But I would also say that there's a lot of great innovation out there, but oftentimes there's this innovation cliff that happens where we see really cool companies, they get a lot of press, they win all of these awards. They still have no idea how to get through a corporate supply chain or how to get consumers at scale. They just don't have access to those resources. So I really encourage brands to almost adopt some of these models and be willing to test and prototype. And again, work pre-competitively. It's kind of, I'm definitely a broken record on that, because consumers need to have some saturation around some of these new models and see it not just kind of in one part of their life, but start to see it elsewhere. So these behaviors start to get picked up more commonly if we're asking them to do it in a very narrow kind of new space, and they're not seeing that anywhere else. I think it's going to be very challenging for them to scale. So I really encourage brands to think about how they can pilot in partnerships with other companies and other reuse models to really test and prototype and help these early stage solutions get into their supply chains, even if it's at a very small scale, because that's going to help them get to the point where they're commercial solutions for those companies out there that are looking for them.
Absolutely. I feel like the interconnectivity of this issue and the need for that pre-competitive collaboration, we're going to keep coming back to that, because so it just touches every corner of our lives, this issue. So it's just something that it's going to take a lot of different solutions to really come at it. So before we break here, I'd love to go around and just do a quick round robin and really hear from each of you what you think is one major step that big brands can take to begin to reduce their impact on this issue, to begin to rethink some of the models that they're using now for sustainability. And Burgess, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, so this is really consistent with what we've heard already today, but no one brand, no one organization can solve the concerns around plastic waste on their own. It really does require end-to-end thinking, peers, pre-competitors, industry, consumers, really everyone. So I think just being open around collaborating where you maybe haven't before, and exploring those partnerships, because partnership to solve plastic waste is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. And Ignacio, would you like to share?
Yep, no, absolutely. I think it's, I will be predictably unexceptional here, but we developed these guidelines. They are there. They will be published. So if you are a company, whether you're small or big, look at your product portfolio and make recycling that simple. Look at every single product, go for monomaterial, avoid multiple materials, avoid complications. It might not look as sexy for the consumer, but I'm sure your marketing team will make it look sexy. So look at all the products that you have and redesign to make it that simple for recycling.
Hey, nothing wrong with a plug, especially if it's helpful. And we'll all be keeping an eye out for the rest of those golden principles when they come out later in the month. And Bridget, what do you think is really a big step that brands can take here?
Yeah, maybe just to kind of go in a different direction, I would say that I think we need to think about how the internal incentives of a company are set up such that they're not pitting themselves against some of their sustainability goals. I see that all the time, particularly in procurement, where it's all about kind of getting the lowest price today, as opposed to thinking about how they can get long-term good pricing and kind of taking on some of the risk that will pay off in the future. So just really thinking about internal incentives across different verticals, to get back to kind of some of Audrey's comments around hitting every department within the company. If their incentives are not set up for solving towards these goals, there's just no chance I think we're going to get there.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives on this. I think we all really learned a lot. I think coming back to, once again, we're not going to find one solution that's going to rid us of this challenge. We're really going to have to embrace a lot of different ideas that are out there and really just think about how that can work and how we can create new systems that work for everybody. So thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives. It was really great to have you here today.